why do we want to write wills that get revealed when we're dead? And then it's this big reveal, this big surprise. And what a lost opportunity I think that is for people to be connected with wealth.
I've spent probably 36 years as a financial advisor, and one of the biggest frustrations as financial advisors have is, helping clients to take actions that are really, really good for them. And one of those is getting a will done, drafting a proper will that, tells your heirs how to take care of your wealth, and more importantly, how to take care of your legacy. In addition to that, making sure that there's powers of attorney in place to make sure that your decisions can be honored, even if you lack capacity, and also to have agreements in place to make sure that your healthcare needs are taken care of. And these are big deals. And in my frustration in trying to communicate the importance of that, I tried to seek out experts in that field. And I was introduced to a book by a friend called Willing Wisdom. And I had a chance to read it over the past couple of months, and it changed my life. And here today, we have a guest. We have the author of Willing Wisdom, Tom Deans. And rather than me introduce him and all of his qualifications, I'd like to ask Tom to tell us about, how, Tom, are you uniquely qualified to talk about this whole area of will planning, estate planning, and legacy. Tom?
Well, first of all, Richard, thank you for having me on. And I hadn't realized 36 years in the business of advising people with their financial planning. I mean, that is impressive. I mean, that says something about you and the work that you're doing. To answer your question, it is, and I don't want to turn this into the Tom Dean show, but to be just really clear to your audience, I am not a financial planner. And in fact, I'm an author. I'm a full-time professional speaker. I started my career 15 years ago, having been the CEO of a large family business, and having sold that business on February 8th, 2007, I wrote a book. I wrote actually quite a controversial book on family business succession planning. And that little book took off. It actually became a New York Times top 10. And no one was more shocked than my first year English professor, because I never saw myself as a writer. This is a really accidental career, second career. But it is something that I've really grown to love. And I think the fact that I've been doing it for 15 years, it's not 36 years, but 15 years, I think tells me that I stumbled on something that is unique. My message is very unique. And then that book, Every Family's Business, really led to the sequel, which is the book that you held up, Willing Wisdom. And in a kind of peculiar way, I actually wrote my books out of order. I probably should have written Willing Wisdom first and then Every Family's Business, but because really Willing Wisdom was really born out of a lot of questions that I was getting from my audiences. So I had, at that point, by 2015, I'd given around 750 paid speeches in about maybe 15 countries. That's now over 1,000 speeches in 26 countries. And I was getting a lot of questions and similar questions, same questions over and over and over. And that was questions coming from business owners who were saying, I'm struggling with my estate plan. I know you're talking about the transition of my business, but I've got a bigger problem. If I sell my business, which, remember, Richard, and you know this, I know you know this, most business owners store the vast majority of their wealth inside their business. Absolutely. And as they move into their 60s and 70s and their 80s, that becomes a really precarious strategy. To have 80%, 90% of your wealth wrapped up in one illiquid stock called your family business, whether it's an auto dealership, a restaurant, a manufacturing company, that is a scary place to be at that point in your life. And so I was getting questions from business owners who were saying, I don't know what I want to do with the transition of my business, and I think it's preventing me from moving forward with a will. And so I get that we get this question over and over and over, and people would say, what should I put in my will? Who should I name as an executor? All my kids, none of my kids. Is three better than one? Uneven number, equal number? All the same questions started to pop up, and I thought I really owe it to my readers and my audiences to better answer. So I set about doing a lot of research. I interviewed and spoke to hundreds of lawyers in the preparation of Willing Wisdom. And this book has grown to be the fastest growing and best selling estate planning book in Canada. And it's not even a technical book on estate planning. In fact, it's the same book that I sell in the US, the same book that I sell in Kuala Lumpur and France and Germany and all around the world. I have written about thematically about what is preventing people from getting these documents in place. There is a tremendous amount of fear and superstition around this subject, and it is causing a lot of problems in families, particularly now when we're right in the middle of the greatest intergenerational wealth transfer of all time. So that's a little bit how I came to write about this subject. I mean, I could tell you about my PhD that I did in England and all sorts of other things. But that's really the stuff that I write about is not academic. It's actually more experiential,
Hmm.
based on literally hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations with business owners and Canadians and Americans primarily who have struggled with their estate plans.
Well, Tom, after reading the book, the big epiphany that I had was this was a book that was addressing what I felt was lacking in will planning. In that, whenever we come up with a topic of will planning, it's very sterile. We write down, okay, this is everything that I have, and this is who I want it to go to, and it speaks nothing from the heart.
Yeah.
And this book to me spoke from the heart, and I felt it was such a game changer. I'm going to order a case of the books. Like, I want these to go out to anybody who's interested in the whole topic of transforming their estate plans. Yeah.
Well, I'm really, it's interesting you said that. I really wrote the book not to be sold one copy at a time inside bookstores. I mean, it's just the way that books are ending up in the hands of people has changed. So I really wrote the book for advisors to give to clients to begin, first of all, conversations between the advisor and the client, but also between the client and the rest of their family, the people they're contemplating leaving their entire life's work to. Like, there is a lot of awkwardness in those relationships. So I thought, if advisors, and notice I'm saying advisors and not lawyers. I'm not picking on lawyers, but they're different. They're not planners. Lawyers, as a profession, take instruction, right? Advisors are planner. They're forward looking. They've got the client's back. They're trying to figure out how can we put in place important either documents or planning concepts or products so that the family works well after my client is gone. That, I can tell you right now, is not what lawyers are doing. How do I know? Because 12.5 million Canadian adults do not have a will. That
Hmm.
is that is a little bit of an indictment,
Yeah.
um, about where we are with estate planning in this country. It is absolutely appalling. And I think people are really shocked to learn that, if they don't have a will, the province in which they live has a nifty little formula waiting for them that will divide up their business, their home, their barbecue, and their canoe according to that provincial formula. It doesn't matter if they've had many, many long conversations with their spouse about what they would like to happen, where they would like to see their assets flow. That and $2 will get them a cup of coffee when they're dead. They have no will. There is no estate plan. It's scary.
Exactly. Wow. Matt, you're a highly qualified financial advisor, and you come to this with, I think, maybe fresher eyes than I do, being newer into the business. But you've got some questions for Tom.
Yeah. So, Tom, other than the obvious of getting a will and keeping it updated, what would you say is the solution to the big problem of estate planning?
I think I think it's getting people to understand that it's not really a one and done thing, right? There's a lot of people who say, "Oh no, I'm good. I had a will." I'm like, "Okay, so when did you write that will? When did you sign it? When was it last updated?" And they're like, "Oh, gee, I don't know, maybe 25 years ago." I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure that something has happened in the last 25 years that would materially change the that will." Uh, and this is a subject that really affects. It's not just a subject that affects people who maybe aren't, I don't know, really up to date on estate planning. Think about it. Remember 1968, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in Los Angeles.
Mm.
That was a pretty horrific day for Americans.
Hmm.
The good news is he had a will. The bad news is, guess who his executor was?
Yeah.
His brother, assassinated 5 years earlier, never updated the will. Now, Bobby Kennedy wasn't just a lawyer, he was the attorney general. When I say that this subject eludes some of the most accomplished, smartest, intelligent people, I'm not kidding. There is something about this subject that people put off, procrastinate, kick the can down the road, whatever it is. I have been fascinated about what those trigger points are, how we can reframe what a will is to get people excited, motivated, aspiring to do this, and not just do it, but to do it in a different way. And that is in a way that is collaborative,
Hmm.
in a way that would bring their intended beneficiaries together into a room and have a conversation about it. Why do we want to write wills that get revealed when we're dead? And then it's this big reveal, this big surprise. And what a lost opportunity I think that is for people to be connected with wealth. Because we know, study after study, that wealth will release potential or it will accelerate demise, but it won't equivocate. It will do one or the other. And
Yeah.
I think advisors, like yourselves, that are making it your business to educate, to put proper tools and inform your clients and your community generally about the importance of these documents. I just think that's a reflection on your own personal philosophy and values. And so good on you.
Hmm. Speaking of personal philosophy and values, one personal philosophy or value that we hold very dear is gratitude. Now, would you say that gratitude springs up more from having a preemptive family conversation compared to the big magical reveal of the will at the end of the process?
Oh, oh, wow. What a great, I've done lots of these types of interviews, podcasts, and webinars. I have never had that question. That is a powerful, insightful question. I think gratitude is at the very center. I think of the process that I'm describing. I think when someone, let's just imagine, let's take, a typical 85-year-old male, maybe business owner who's retired, sold their business, has certainly surplus capital, real estate, investments. And the old approach would be, get a will done, hide it, lock it away, don't tip your hand on who gets what, and compare that or contrast that with that person who works with their advisor to have a family meeting, who would begin a family meeting something this way: I've worked hard all my life. I have spent less than I earned. I have invested diligently. But moreover, I have got to this place because many people had a hand in my success. I have gratitude and I want to teach you, my family, about what wealth is and what it isn't. And as I consider its transition into your hands, I want to have many conversations about what that will look like when I'm not here. Oh my God. Now, how great a meeting is that going to turn out to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so compare that to the family that wraps the whole subject in silence, which of course continues to be the great destroyer of Canadian family wealth. It's not families that talk and share uh, or even debate about what wealth is. It's the families that wrap the entire subject in silence.
Hmm.
Dan Sullivan, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's the owner
Sure.
of Strategic Coach, and he's got a good saying. He says, when I'm in a vacuum, when I'm experiencing a vacuum of feedback and a vacuum of being kept in the dark, I start having hallucinations, and I can see that the family that's kept in the dark about what this estate looks like long term, they begin to hallucinate. They begin to make up stories, don't they?
They absolutely do. And, Dan is also famous for another saying, which is all progress starts by telling the truth. And I
Yes.
think, and I think that's another prescient, observation when it comes to estate planning. And I believe firmly that we've been led to believe that estate planning is merely answering the question, who gets my stuff when I'm dead? Well, no wonder 12 million people don't have a will. I mean, how much
Hmm.
fun is that? I mean, and I kind of approached the subject in a little bit of a contrarian way and said, oh no, 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 no. Estate planning is very much about the living. And we've been led to believe that, as I said, it's just about, dividing up assets. There is, as you know, two other documents that get executed when we go in for a will. One is a financial power of attorney, and the other one is a healthcare directive. And those two additional documents, financial power of attorney and a healthcare directive, those are documents that come into effect while we're still on the planet.
Mhm.
And I don't know anyone who has those documents but doesn't have a will. In other words, the primary document is the will, and those are the two bonus documents. So I tell people all the time, you want to give yourself a gift when you have lost maybe cognitive abilities, maybe you've got dementia, maybe you've got Alzheimer's, maybe there's something else going on, you've lost mobility, the ability to speak, you've had a stroke. Guess what? Who is likely going to step up and oversee your care? Is it going to be some random person off the street?
Hmm.
Over and over and over in this country, right across this country, it is family that are thrust into those positions of providing care or oversight of that care. And so I start estate planning from the place of aging. It is the same conversation. The people we likely intend to leave our wealth are the same people we hope are going to provide our care. So why don't we have the same it's the same conversation. Why would we leave those people in the dark and then expect them to change our diapers when we're 94? When they're 68? I don't get it.
Hmm.
So I've really spent the better part of 15 years trying to provoke, build the case, inspire, whatever it is, to get people moving and understand that there is a lot to lose if we don't have these conversations.
Hmm. Wow, that's very powerful. Now, we did mention earlier, or you did mention earlier, that big question of, well, when was the last time you updated your will? But what are some other questions that people might be asking themselves to see if this is a problem that needs to be addressed in their lives?
Yeah, I think the selection of executor really keeps popping up like number one, number two, over and over
Yeah.
and over. People are always second guessing. And I alluded to it earlier. Should it be family members? Should it be all my children, none of my children, one of my child, or even numbers, odd numbers? Do we need a tiebreaker vote? The reality is, and people ask me all the time for my advice, and I'm like, how do I know? I mean, I start from a place, and it's a very Socratic approach. I believe that the answer is always in the room, and the best answer for a particular person and their estate plan is in the room, and it resides somewhere between the relationship of the person considering writing their will and their intended beneficiaries. Ask the question. I love family meetings, and often a great agenda item for the very first family meeting with an advisor present would be to say, listen, your mother and I have gathered you guys in the room. We want to start having a family meeting because we are getting on in age. And instead of wrapping all of our wealth and our estate plans in secret, we want to just start really talking about it and getting out in front of this. And so we have to update our will. And instead of us proclaiming what we want or who we want as our executor, we thought we'd just get you guys in the room and ask the question. Like, what do you guys think? Do you see the shift in power there? From I'm the old guy or woman with a lot of money, and I'm going to ask you some questions, and whoever gives me the best answer is going to get the most money. Do you see the danger in that scenario? What I'm describing is really counterintuitive because when you've worked hard to create surplus capital and control and independence, I come along and say, now I'm asking you to voluntarily relinquish it as a dress rehearsal for your own aging process where you will likely lose control and put yourself into the hands and the trust and hopefully the love and respect of other people. Who? It's family. It's always wealth management, insurance, investing. it's always been about family.
Yeah.
It's always been about family. And yet it's often the last concept that we invoke when we're designing really, really smart, durable, intelligent, respectful financial plans.
Mm-hmm. I think people get stuck on all these decisions. And that whole solution of bringing the family together, all the stakeholders, and asking them the question and having a conversation is absolutely beautiful. But still, we may still get stuck. And I think it's really important, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, to go for progress rather than perfection. Like we might go through the progress, and in the first round, we get an 80% done right will, right?
Oh,
And but that's better than nothing, right?
oh, absolutely.
And then we have another family meeting in the future, and preferably annually, as your book suggests. And then we deal with that 20% that's left undone. Okay, let's work on this a bit more. Let's work on doing an 80% approach on the remaining 20, and let's keep iterating and reviewing because the first round is may not necessarily be pretty. Am I right?
Oh, 100%. I use the expression, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. And, there is no such thing as a perfect will. I updated my will 3 times one year. I sold a business, I started a new business, I had a death of one of my beneficiaries, and a birth of a
Hmm.
niece. Like 3 material changes in my life that led me to update my will. I hear all the time, it's very important to update your will every 5 years. I keep hearing it. What is magical about 5 years? You'll hear it all the time. Same thing with business owners. If you ask them about their business succession plans, when are they going to sell or transition the business? They'll say 5 years. I come back next year, it's not 4, it's always 5. It's
Hmm.
always 5. So, no, I would say, look, um, and it's another reason, it's a good insight on why people don't have a will. They go, well, I'm not going to write a will right now because I'm going to sell my business. Or I'm not going to write a will right now because I'm going to sell the cottage. And because it's just going to be outdated. So I'll just, like, they'll always find another major event that's coming up that they can foretell. And they'll just push off, push off, push off, push off. And it is absolutely devastating. You know, um, roughly 800 Canadians will die today. 400 of them without a will. If it's not a stretch to assume that the average person will have about 10 people who are deeply, deeply touched by their death. And so today, 4,000 Canadians are thrust into chaos, trying to honor the life of the person they loved, and they won't know how to agree on a celebration of life because if there's no will, there's no executor, no one to implement final wishes, and families that will be fighting over assets, fighting over cottages, fighting over family businesses, and here we go again. And then what is the last thing that people remember? Do they remember the business owner who is dutifully a great provider for his family or her family? No, they remember the last act, the act that was left with great indecision or indifference, and that's what people remember. They
Mhm.
remember the indifference, and that
Yeah.
becomes the legacy. And it's a little harsh, but I don't know what else I can say to get people moving and inspired and understanding that this lack of willingness to write a will is destroying families and communities from the inside out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you've really touched on what's at stake if a will is not in place. But what do you think are the biggest effects and benefits of having a will in place that is up to date and is current and is in line with how somebody wants to be not only remembered but um, wants their legacy to continue in this world?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, it does. If you've read my first book, I built the case, and this is probably why it's a little controversial. I'm saying to business owners specifically, business owners, your family business, your business that you built, yeah, it's not going to survive. Statistically, they just don't last. People will pull a data point. They'll pick out the Richardson's family, and it's a fourth generation, fifth generation, right? They'll pick out one data point and say, "See, businesses last." Well, that is a really tiny, tiny percent. Only 3% of family businesses survive to the third generation. There is no stat for fourth generation. It's so tiny, right? So I wrote this book that said, your business is not your legacy, but it did beg the question: if not the business, then what is? Well, I think it's family, and I
Hmm.
continue that theme in Willing Wisdom. I truly believe that it is our DNA, it is our values, it is the stories that we share while we are alive. It's those stories that we impart and shape the lives of the next generation who will go off to do hopefully interesting things and productive things with their lives. That is a legacy. And I think that when we have a written will and it's shared and discussed and built collaboratively so that there are no surprises, then when we die, and we will, then people can grieve.
Hmm.
It's very difficult to grieve when you're litigating. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to grieve when you're dismantling your parents' home, ripping the drywall off the walls, going through the air vents, looking for a document that you think exists, but you're not really sure.
And
Yeah,
yeah, okay. The key
it's
word you
just
mentioned
chaos.
there, yeah. Wow. The key word you mentioned there is grieving. And it's interesting how we made two contrasting examples. One whereby nothing's in place and the thing that you remember is the indecision, right? Now, let's contrast that with a family who's had a conversation. How do you think the lives of that family is transformed by the conversation? And
Oh,
maybe a little more specifically,
yeah.
do you feel like the beneficiaries become more involved in honoring the gifts and the hard work of the parent, knowing that they're a part of what's going to be continuing rather than, again, that magic surprise at the end of it?
Oh, without question. Without question. The more conversation, the more preparation of heirs. I mean, today, $205 million will be inherited today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the day after that and the day after that for the next 10 years. It's between 755 billion and $1 trillion will transfer in the next decade. It is the greatest single generational shift of wealth in the history of the planet. And at that very moment in time, we're writing fewer and fewer wills. What? What is going on? What is it about the conversation in family about money, right?
Mhm.
Like we tell our kids when they're growing up, listen, kids, get a summer job, you work hard, you save, you get a good education. You get a good education, you're going to get a good job. You make lots of money. And then guess what? If you're really successful when you do all that, then we'll take all of what you have done and wrap it in secrecy because there is something dangerous and awkward and toxic about money. So we'll just leave it alone. Like, do you see the paradox in all of that? How
Mhm.
confusing that is. Compare that with the family. Just before the pandemic, I was speaking in Chicago. I was a speaking resource inside a family meeting. Three generations were in that room that day. 17 family members, three generations. Guess who was chairing? Guess who was chairing that meeting that day? It was a 15-year-old girl. They rotate the chair. This family meeting, it's not hierarchical. It's not the people with the money. In fact, they're using the family meeting to slowly relinquish control. It's incredibly democratic, right? It's the opposite of what a business is. But this is the business of family and the transition of family wealth. It is unbelievable when it's done well, when we connect the next generation to the stories of how wealth was created and what was risked to create wealth. And here's the best part: the mistakes that the senior generation made. It's not just about sharing rainbows and unicorns and how fantastic they were at investing and making money. No, they're using the family meeting to share where they pulled up short and sharing stories and wisdom, and willing wisdom, sharing the wisdom that there was hard earned,
Hmm.
and so that the next generation doesn't make the same mistake. I mean, this is how dynastic family wealth is created and preserved in transition. It's
Yeah.
not an accident. People work at it, and it actually is almost more work to protect money and transition it wisely than it is to make it in the first place. Really hard, and we know that because globally there is some version of that saying, "Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves," right? In Holland, it's clogs to clogs. In Asia, it's rice paddy to rice paddy. Like wherever you go, that is the narrative, the trajectory. Make it, next generation holds it, the third one blows it, and they're back to working in the fields, right? And I come along and say that is nonsense. We have a better way of doing it. And I think at the center, not to kind of blow your own horn, but at the center of that is you guys. You families that try to navigate this on their own, try to treat it like a do-it-yourself project, like building a fence on the weekend, going to Home Hardware or whatever and getting some lumber, like that. That is not going to work. You put family in a room together without a third party that is neutral, someone taking minutes, someone who's got preparation and agenda, writing down to do items, calls to action, whatever, like structure, good governance. They're going to struggle. They may have one, but they probably won't have a second or a third or a fourth or a fifth one. So no, the third party advisor is crucial, and I think wealth advisors are really well positioned, only because you've got a much bigger view of what wealth is, and actually what wealth isn't.
This changes the game. It really does, because it completely deals with what's in the heart of the person writing the will. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Richard, I travel to a lot of countries. I go to a lot of great cities, and one of my favorite pastimes, if I got some spare time, if I'm in New York or Boston or LA or wherever I'm going, I'll often go to the museums or I'll go to a public library where wills are actually often on display, especially in New York. The New York Public Library has got fantastic displays of will. There was a time when wills were a very personal document. It was like a love letter to the world, where people would write down in great detail their dreams and aspirations for what their community or family would do with whatever they were leaving. And I mean, they were incredibly personal documents. And where have we come? We've come to a place where people go into Staples now and get a will kit for 1995 and bang it out as quickly as they can and then hide it. And I'm just fascinated on what has happened and why have we got to this place, and how can we resurrect that idea of what a will is, and a
Hmm.
public letter of our intentions. And remember, when we die intestate, that is to say without a will, there is no province in Canada that has a formula that has any allocation for charity. So you could have someone who is chairing a hospital foundation board or a university board or sitting on that board or anything, actively involved and committed to a particular charity. No will, nothing. Nothing for that charity. What a lost opportunity, especially when we're considering that we have, the biggest estates in the history of this country. I mean, think of the real estate appreciation, the appreciation investments, the greatest generation of wealth creators, the baby boomers, are turning 75 this year. And they have massive estates, and half of them have no will, which means half of them will lose that opportunity to connect their children to the causes that were central to their DNA, to who they were. And that's a lost opportunity for everyone.
Impact organizations, and I prefer to call them impact organizations rather than nonprofit. Impact organizations are incredibly challenged. And I think it is directly correlated to our increasing failure to get the wills done right. Because even at the point of writing the wills, the charitable aspect becomes an afterthought. People are often sitting in a lawyer's office and the question comes up, well, okay, I get that you want to leave everything to each other, if you're married and then to your children afterwards, but have you given thought to any charities? And people approach it as an afterthought instead of in advance as a reflection of what they hold dear. In other words, leaving a legacy to an organization that reflects what they hold dear.
Yeah, and that is a lost opportunity. And of course, one of the fastest growing areas of estate litigation is actually surviving children who are finding out that their parents did leave something material, a material gift to a charity. No conversation. Again, surprise. And these children are losing their minds,
Hmm.
and they're suing these charities. I mean, this is the legacy that we're leaving. When I say that
Wow.
silence is the great destroyer of Canadian families, that's a good example. That's a living example of what's taking place right across this country. And that's shocking.
That's such a tragedy because often we leave stuff to charities that are important to us, that share our values, that are an expression of what we hold dear. And I just feel like if it was in a family conversation context, we could have established that, hey, mom and dad actually really love that charity because it represents our values. So in that case, it's like there's a reason for it. There's a backup to it. There's a connection for the children too.
A connection, a context, and an opportunity to continue your parents' work in the
Yeah.
philanthropic world. And I see that with really successful families. They actually use philanthropy to connect their children to the concept of wealth. And I'll go back to that family meeting in Chicago. I met before I went into that room. I met a couple of charities that were also waiting to go in. So this family does a kind of a little bit of a version of Shark Tank or Dragon's Den. Every year they bring in a couple of new charities to pitch the family on why that family should take their philanthropic allocation and support that particular cause. And after the presentations by the charities leave, and then the family go right at it. They go at it with the same kind of intellectual rigor and discipline that they go after investments. So what the senior generation is trying to do is say like, hey, whether it's $1 for charity, $1 that we take out of our holding company for consumption to buy something, or $1 for an investment, a dollar is a dollar. And so they're teaching that next generation that they're not being flippant with their philanthropic donations. They're looking for impact. There's that
Yeah.
word. They're looking for impact. And I'll tell you, it was something to watch,
Wow.
to see kids dig in and build a case for why that charity and not that charity. Winners and losers, even in the philanthropic world, winners and losers.
The most interesting thing I find about that is often the most successful tr- teaching of wealth to the next generation is always by leading by example. And I see that as such a wonderful opportunity to teach the next generation to lead by example, by having them involved in that conversation and to have them, as you were saying, putting the rigor that needs to be put towards these areas of our lives.
Yeah, and what you describe is an opportunity, right, to lead by example, but it's also a little bit of a conundrum because there is something called family systems theory, which basically is an academic kind of study of of the family as a system, as an organization. And one of the central tenets of family systems theory is that families tend to repeat. Okay, they repeat good stuff, they repeat bad stuff. They've watched people lead by example, or they've watched people not lead by example. So in the context of estate planning, we have a generation right now of very wealthy Canadians who are treating their estates exactly the way their parents did.
Hmm.
So they're first generation wealth creators who are looking inside their own family narrative for clues to guide them. There's nothing there. Their parents probably had no will, no conversation. So part of what you describe is both an opportunity and a threat. Part of what I'm trying to do with my work is to say, hey, congratulations. You're a saver. You've been a great event. You've been diligent. You bought a house, and you're going to leave this planet with surplus capital that will impact people's lives. You have a duty and responsibility. With that wealth creation comes a duty and responsibility to prepare people. Listen, guys, I have met people. Well, again, going back to that family in Chicago, I learned that G2 had inherited $80 million. Okay, they had turned it into between 4 and 6 billion. Okay, so this idea that a large inheritance will destroy work ethic is total nonsense.
Hmm.
But I also have met people in my travels who have inherited $10,000 and they have been dead in 30 days because of their addictions. And there it is. There we have it, two ends of the continuum. And all I'm saying is to people, what is it in your family? Where are you?
Mhm.
You're somewhere on that line. you're somewhere on that line between healthy and unhealthy. And I think when we have capital, we really truly do have that sense of duty to prepare people for what is surely coming their way, and not to engage in that conversation can do tremendous harm. And if you've watched any documentaries on sudden wealth, whether it's a lottery winner, it is devastating to inherit a lot of money without conversation.
Hmm. Now we're mentioning a lot about the family conversation and the need to ask important questions. Now in your book you have a few key questions, and I thought maybe let's go through a few of these key questions. And I'd like to get your opinion on why you think they're important in a family conversation.
Yeah, sure. Well, listen, we got 7 questions. We don't have time to do all 7, but
Yeah.
what are some of your favorites?
I really like the what word best describes our family.
Yeah, that's early on in the it's question number 1, and I like that because it's a gentle question, right? It's not a question that's going to lead to judgment. It's often a great place for people to say, um, we're a fun family, and then tell a story why. Someone will tell a story. You will notice that a lot of the questions are backward looking questions. Before we start looking forward at how we want to divide our state, I think it's really fun for families in a family meeting context to actually look backwards and say, where did we come from? We all came from somewhere. And someone had a hand in our success. Speaking to your earlier comment about gratitude, right? We've come from some place. And I think estate planning is a great place to express that gratitude and to pass on that gratitude to those we hope will be our emissaries and continue either our work or our values and our communities. And I just think when we approach family meetings in that spirit, as opposed to a dictum telling people, that I'm going to leave my business to my eldest son, even though my youngest daughter has an MBA from Harvard. Like crazy, crazy things that are going on because of tradition, not because of conversation and deep, repetitive family conversations, but weird things that are alive and well in a lot of families that
Yeah.
don't have people like yourself that are inserting themselves and bringing some structure and transparency. We haven't used that word, but transparency to what we hope will be a really, really great family that thrives when we're not here. And I think that is what estate planning is. It's not about just answering who gets our stuff. It's how do we build families that work well when we're not here? Now that
Hmm.
is a gift. That is
Wow.
an estate plan.
Wow.
So Matt, that was your favorite question.
Yes. Yes.
Um, the one that really piques my interest and is, I think, a big challenge in estate planning, and it reflects something my mom would always teach us, and that is, when raising you guys, it was impossible to be equal, but it was entirely possible to be equitable. In other words, treating us each where our needs were. And it hasn't been until this stage in my life that I'm starting to figure it out. So the question that I kind of gravitated towards is, in the context of planning for the division of your assets, does fair mean fair, or does fair mean equal? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that is a big one. I mean, there are so many different personalities alive in families, and there are so many different assets that don't chop up nice and neatly. Can you imagine a family of 6, and you leave a cottage to 6 kids? Now remember, there's only 2 bedrooms in this cottage, and each of your 6 kids have two kids. Like, do the math. Um, I think there's a lot of families that look at that conundrum and they go, "Oh my God, this is just going to end badly. If I broach the subject of who gets the cottage, it is going to end bad." So you know what I'm going to do? I'll give you a hint. Yeah, nothing.
I
That
like
was
that
about
dramatic pause.
that was about 4 seconds of silence. Try 40 years of family going, where is this going to go? Who's going to get it? And no one wants to broach the subject because no one wants to look rude and say to mom and dad, "Look, we got to make a decision. We got to know Otherwise, you're going to leave the six of us fighting over this thing, either in court, especially if one's married to a lawyer. Like, come on, we can do better than that. So I talk about that in Willing Wisdom. I talk about, hard to divide assets, and they would be family businesses, you know, jewelry, cars, art, real estate. So I just think that I offer a different process that I've seen work. I've seen it work in my own family. Our executors um, will actually get a valuation on those particular assets, and we then offer those assets to the family. We got to pay market price, right? And then the executor would collect the money for that particular asset, say a cottage, and then it would distribute it right on back to the family. So if you got three kids and one decides to buy the cottage, right? They get a third of their money back. They get it at a 33% discount. Or, shockingly, guess what I'm finding? No one wants it. There's lots of kids who want it, not because they really want it. They just don't want someone else to have it in
Yeah.
the family. So when you use the market and market discipline and market rules to protect value and concepts of fairness and equality, so that is a good example of fairness and equality. One person gets the cottage, but they paid for it, and the other people get cash, but everyone gets what they want. And these rules of engagement work beautifully with businesses, cottages, arts, car, things that you just can't take a pair of scissors to and divide.
Hmm.
Cash, on the other hand, is really easy to divide. So what I see really successful estates doing is they start as they get older, they start shedding those hard to divide assets and they move to cash. And then when they die, cash is equal, easy to divide and easy to keep fairness and equality as concepts in check.
Hmm.
I love it. There's five other questions, and I would, just like when I was reading the book, I was so tempted to skip ahead and read the questions because I just wanted to know that what they were all about. But it's all in the book, and we're going to make that book available to those who want to have a conversation about this. It was a pleasure reading it. Like I said, it's changed my perspective on estate planning. And we get really excited about the impact of our work in the lives of our clients. From your perspective, what does it look like for someone when they have established a will and powers of attorney and advance directives that really capture their wishes? What does that look like, kind of encapsulated in your perspective?
I think it is a physical manifestation that I see. I see people almost for the first time be able to breathe. There is something really terrifying for people to imagine that aging has to be this solo journey. And when people open this conversation up around their estate plans and talk about the division of their assets and fold that conversation into a conversation of where they hope to live when they lose mobility or cognitive abilities, and to have family members step up and say, oh my gosh, we would love to provide that care, or we'll share this care, and that sense of fear recedes, that terrifying fear of dying alone recedes because family have opened up that larger conversation about money and wealth and aging. They're the same conversation. They're really the same conversation. And I think when people connect those two dots with the help of their advisors, again, I really want to stress that point. It's hard to do this on your own. When they do this, you can literally see people breathe. This is overwhelming for most people, and that sense of accomplishment to overcome this fear about talking about money with the people they love. It's an amazing transformation for families.
Couldn't agree more. Matt, what are your thoughts?
What a powerful transformation that this could be. The thing that really stuck out to me was the importance of stories,
Mm.
especially in knowing where you came from and the sacrifices of the people that came before you. And I think having that to transform a family and potentially carry on those same values and work ethic and honor the past and where you came from is just such a powerful thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I often when I'm doing large speaking events, I'll often ask my audience a rhetorical question. I'll say, who knows the name of the founder of Coca-Cola? And there's crickets. Like no one knows. Like no one knows. This is the third most valuable consumer brand in the history of the planet. No one knows, and no one particularly cares who the founder is. And it's my way of making the point that at the end of the day, when we talk about legacy and who will remember our time and contribution and the impact that we made on this planet, it's folks, it's family. And it's immediate family. It's one or two or three, maybe if you're lucky, four generations out. But I also ask my audience if they know the name of their great 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 grandmother, and most people don't know. So it's my way of saying, listen, we can make this subject of legacy way more complicated than it is. It is our closest friends, it is our closest family members who will take our ideas and our storytelling and values and continue to breathe life into those qualities. And hopefully that gives a sense of peace, I think, as we near the last breath on this planet. And I think that's what legacy is. And it can be really satisfying to watch people do that. And lastly, the opposite of that is the family meeting where the great business founder sits at the head of a boardroom table, and it's not democratic, and there isn't concepts of equality. It's the business owner telling stories about how fantastic they are and how much money they've made, and how they suck all the oxygen out of the room and leave no room for the next generation not to be as good, but actually to be diminished. What I'm talking about is the opposite, where families gather and say, I want and hope that you're even better. And
Wow.
better doesn't mean necessarily richer, but I mean better in the sense that you go off and you do something that feels right for you, as
Mhm.
opposed to you being a version of me. I want to say you have the permission, the authenticity to go off and be the person you were meant to be. You know, had Henry Ford continued in his father's family business, he would have been a farmer. So is the Ford Motor Company really a story about a failed family farm? Or was it really a story about a farming father who saw something in his son, gave him a little bit of a loan, a little bit of money, and said, go off and do something that you're good at? That part of the Ford Motor Company story is never told. Same thing with Steve Jobs. His father ran a restaurant. Bill Gates' father was a lawyer. Are those failed restaurants and failed law firms? But they were all fathers who and parents who extended that ultimate gift to their children: the freedom, the flexibility, and the permission to go off and be real.
Wow.
I love it. We truly stand on the shoulders of giants.
Indeed.
You know, Tom, you've created a great tool that pairs hand in glove with the Willing Wisdom book, and you've extended that tool to our business to help our clients engage with, and it's called the Willing Wisdom Index. And I think it's a great way to start the conversation. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, I'm really, really proud of this tool. You know, it does go with the book. And I should, just before I talk about the Willing Wisdom Index, just remind people that, listen, the world did not need another academic book on estate planning. This is actually a fun book about three people sitting in a bar in Las Vegas, right? Talking
Yeah,
about aging and wills. It's funny. And there's lots of stories and little vignettes. And like it moves. It's a really quick, fast, fun read.
it
Uh,
is.
I tried to put the fun back in funeral. I really did. Um, uh, and then I tried to follow that up with a tool that was equally fun and equally non-intimidating. I really spent a lot of time stripping out all the $1 million intimidating words and Latin words, that I think makes estate planning the problem that a lot of people think it is. I took that all out and made it fun. It is a checklist that takes 8 minutes. I think it's the ultimate estate planning checklist. It takes 8 minutes, you answer some questions, you click, and instantly you'll receive a personalized 20-page report giving you some recommendations to help start a family meeting, to make some decisions before you meet with your lawyer. And we know that when you do that, when you select your executor, backup executor, power of attorney, backup power of attorney, when you've got all those major decisions made before you meet with your lawyer, chances are you're going to have a shorter meeting with lawyers. Shorter meeting with lawyers equals
Less
smaller
fees.
bills with lawyers. Exactly. So for 8 minutes, you can make this. First of all, you can make the subject interesting and fun, and you can save some money along the way.
It's fantastic, Tom. This is a gift, and we're gonna include a link to the Willing Wisdom Index in the show notes for people to engage with. Tom, you're a gift, and what you've created here is a gift. I think you shaped the whole financial plan, the whole estate planning conversation in the context of a great financial plan, because you focused it on the key values that hold families together and help successful families continue to get better and better over time. I really appreciate the conversation here today.
Well, thanks for having my guest, and I would be remiss. And in the spirit of today's conversation, I dedicate my first book to my father, and my second one to my mother. My father was a tremendously successful business owner, really astute, smart, financial mind. My mother was a psychotherapist. So I grew up in a world with hard, technical, fact-based kind of business conversations. And at the dinner table, they would swing over to Freud, finance and hard and soft, constantly toggling back and forth between the hard and soft. And that really is kind of why I wrote the books, or how I wrote the books I did. So I give credit and gratitude to the people who really showed me that way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Tom, I look forward to future conversations, and thank you for this one, and thank you for the collaboration. We'll talk to you again.
Thanks for having me as your guest. I really enjoyed it. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.